What's the craziest thing someone has done that you went to high school with? I went to school with a girl who said she was going to England and her cousin from England was headed to the US. She showed up a few days later with a British accent, seriously expecting everyone to believe it was actually her identical cousin. Like Patty and Kathy Lane from the Patty Duke show. It was all so foolish. I was embarrassed for her. A kid at my school punched a female teacher in the face and broke her glasses in art class. Hearing the cry, another teacher came in and went crazy. Was going to beat the kid's ass. Chased him out of the classroom and into this recreational area. The kid somehow found a shard of glass on the floor. Turned around and stabbed the other teacher in the shoulder. He's been in and out of prison since. More in than out. I went to high school with a guy that got high on PCP, murdered his girlfriend, and got chased around the city by cops. Does that count? Only if it isn't Florida. My buddy in high school regularly got into fights with random people, no matter the age or group size. I was always scared of these situations, but I still hung out with him for a long ass time. He once wiped the floor with 5 people at once. In the end he got kicked out of school because he threatened the math teacher's life after getting an F for handing in an empty test sheet. Some kid was known in our big Catholic high school for doing some pretty nasty stuff. A stunt that has probably most remembered for was when he went into one of the men's restrooms with a small audience, got onto his knees, cupped his hands, and drank the water from a urinal. The dean just so happened to walk into as he was doing it, and then his parents were called. The same kid licked a pig fetus in his biology lab during the swine flu pandemic. The same kid licked a pig fetus in his biology lab during the swine flu pandemic. On the one hand, licking formaldehyde is not a great idea. On the other hand, because of the formaldehyde, swine flu was probably not a problem. A couple had sex in the washroom while our entire school was evacuated due to a bomb threat. I only knew because I saw them walk out the washroom after it was safe to return to class and the condom wrapper fell out the girl's shirt. Snuck into where the buses we parked and set 3 buses on fire. He was arrested for arson and expelled. He was 17 at the time. Still not sure why he did it. Some guy shat in another guy's school backpack. This one was insane, and it happened in January. Physics teacher didn't like a guy as he was disobedient, arrogant. He picked up a lots of fights and used to bully other students. He was my classmate. This guy scored above average marks, even though he did all those other stuff. So during the exams the teacher had to give 20% of the marks, based on how you behaved during classes. And the teacher gave him a 0 and this guy got suspended as this teacher complained about him. So this guy printed posters which stated the teacher died due to excess consumption of alcohol. In India people stick posters in the neighborhood if a person died and would request everyone to attend the last rites, so it was common. He hired few guys and stuck the posters around the school neighborhood and near the teacher's house. Moreover, the poster had the teacher's photo and name. So the teacher hired a bunch of guys to remove all the stuck posters and the teacher left the school. We had one kid who was in my class in my sophomore year who had all sorts of strange behaviors. He had a backpack that he'd put on by laying it down on the ground, lying down in it so that he could get his arms in it, and then would flip around like a turtle and push himself up. Someone also once asked him to open a window to let some fresh air in, and he went around the class asking everyone for a high five after doing so. Even after his high five being rejected by the first few people, he just kept on going. He also made his own language and lectured people about it. He didn't score particularly high grades either, so it's not like he was some sort of savant high functioning autist either. Maybe not the most extreme or impactful, but crazy in its own way. Know a guy who broke some other dude's arm for stealing his sandwich. Someone threw a dildo at a substitute teacher. My classmate threw a stool at a teacher and the same boy grabbed some papers. I suppose it was an official complaint about this guy from the same teacher and ripped it into pieces. The same guy has a friend who used to sell drugs at our school. It led to Oman. It's like police, but with a better preparation in my country, taking over our school and searching through our lockers. 2009. We were 15. We had a double free class, but they forgot about us and didn't assign us as supervising teacher. 30 lads, 80 minutes, no supervision. People got hurt from running across tabletops. Educational CDs were flung like frisbees. School bags were hurled at the weakest classmates. Books from the teacher's desk were dropped from the window, slapping the hard concrete below. Then, on the 60-inch TV sitting proudly in the corner of the room, usually reserved for films about ancient history and political debates, hardcore porn was played full blast. On the screen where once Napoleon waved his French flag of freedom, Jenna Jameson now wipes semen from her eyes. To finish it off, all of us went to the top of the class, where the teacher's desk was, ransacked her belongings, counted down from 5, and every man for himself as we raced to the other end of the classroom, flipping tables, pushing whoever got in the way, screaming at the top of our lungs. We conquered that space for an hour and a half. Then the inevitable stern knock on the door. The German teacher comes in, stands in silence as his eyes dart around the room before shouting, "Lads, ye made pure shit of the classroom. I have 9 videos for it. Those were the glory days of youth." One guy got caught shoplifting from a crappy discount shop. Then a few years later died of alcohol poisoning doing a drinking challenge. The worst bully picked on gay students unmercifully, making their lives miserable. Ironically, the openly gay student he bullied the most became his lover, and the two of them opened a hairdressing parlor they named Takes Two to Tango, apostrophe. Evangeline Lilly went to my high school. She technically graduated a couple years before me, but at the time, when I was still in school, she came back to visit because her dad was the librarian/home economics teacher. So that's cool. Didn't really announce she was coming to visit her dad and former teachers. I was a nerd who loved to read, so I spent every second I could in the library among the books. Lol. Met her a couple times. Super chill. 2 different guys kidnapped and murdered their estranged partners. One guy robbed a large chain supermarket with a couple other guys, and it turned into a hostage situation. One guy stole his dad's drag race car and had a citywide high-speed police chase. One girl ran away to Hawaii with a teacher over spring break, which ruined his career. Believe it or not, I lived in a middle-class not so rough area. A guy in my year and his friend beat someone to death. I'd say that's pretty crazy. If I remember rightly, the victim was a nasty piece of work that terrorized a lot of people. No excuse, obviously. Just that he clearly chose the wrong people at some point. I think he may have done some seriously bad shit. As one of the nicest guys I ever knew quietly said, he deserved everything he got. When people were talking about it in class once, they shut up fast, and no more was said. Never knew anything else. There was a kid a few years younger who was getting told off by a teacher and decided to lamp him. Kid wasn't that big. Teacher was huge, but the kid got a lucky punch and the teacher folded. Kid proceeded to kick him in the head until he was pulled away. Poor teacher ended up blind in one eye and obviously left teaching. Poor sod. Edit. On a nicer note, a girl in my year was a major activist even at school, and later went on to be an ambassador for a women's charity and won some prizes for her work. That's a good one. Not crazy I suppose, but awesome. Edit again. Just remembered. A friend of mine cut part of his tongue off with sewing scissors while he was messing around with them. Gross. Thankfully we weren't in the same class for that. Just heard about it after. A guy from my high school got married, had a kid, and then had a bitter divorce about 10 years later. One day, the ex-wife was visiting a friend that was a male. He drove over with his kid and left the kid waiting in his truck, and then went in the house and shot the ex-wife and the male friend several times. Both lived, thank God, and the ducker is in prison. A kid brought a vial of liquid into school, showed it to me and a few others who sat at the table, and claimed it was cyanide. They told us that their intent was to poison the vice principal. One of the other kids told on them, and we all ended up having to go to court as witnesses. Never did find out if it was actually cyanide or not. This one kid came into class one day and immediately sat in the back and went to sleep. He would stick his head up and do something sneaky in his book bag and then go back to sleeping on his desk. The teacher eventually got annoyed and went to wake him up. He was completely passed out and had pissed his pants until the entire front was soaked. The teacher opened his book bag and found a half-gallon of gin and a small baggie of heroin. Police woke him up and dragged him out the classroom, and that's the last time I ever saw that legend. Teammate in high school went on to have a successful college football career and a short stint in the NFL. Then was arrested in our hometown for shoplifting from a Best Buy. After searching the backpack he was carrying, they found small electronics, a spoon, heroin, some coke and other paraphernalia. Now, he's coaching varsity high school football at, you guessed it, our old high school. Crazy smart guy in our class was pretty much destined to be some famous scientist. At the senior scholarship night, like an award ceremony, but for the scholarships the students got, he got a $60,000 grant to go study at some prestigious college for physics or something. Learned a few years later the pressure of everyone's expectations broke him, and he completely dropped out of everything. He quit school and got a minimum wage job. I hope he is doing better now. Good friend of mine stabbed 2 people, got out on bail, and tried to murder a guy with a couple of friends. Stabbed him like 10 times. The guy escaped to a shop across the street and my friend went to prison. I was in the same math class as the first wife of the man who perpetrated the Orlando nightclub massacre. A guy I knew since kindergarten and spent 12 years together in Boy Scouts and would even bump into in college went missing last year. He was a veteran who fought in the Middle East after high school and was working a bar job after retiring from the military. Disappeared without a trace. When I was in high school, a group of friends and I climbed to the roof on the last day of our senior year and threw water balloons at the underclassmen as they left. We got detained by the police, and our parents practically fought the principal so we could walk across the stage for graduation. We had a sub who was terrified of pine cones, and also a huge bitch. No one likes this woman for reals. One day when we knew she was subbing for my history class, we all went out to the trees next to the building and collected as many pine ones as we could and put them on our desks and her desk before the bell. She ended up calling the dean and demanding detention/suspensions, but they couldn't prove there was any sort of malicious intent, and the student handbook said nothing about putting pine ones on our desk. Probably one of my favorite high school memories. I don't know what he did. All I know is it didn't work out. They found his bullet-riddled body inside a smoldering, bullet-shredded car in the Nevada desert. A guy from my homeroom class, a few months after graduation. He always seemed kind of psycho. He and his friend stole a bunch of firearms valued at over $12,000 and hid them in a cave, which is also a very popular landmark and hangout spot. They were charged with grand theft and no one knows to this day what their plans for them were. Similarly, my fiance had a bully who several years after graduation stole the cash register from their beloved local ice cream shop. His mugshot makes us laugh every time we see it. Not crazy per se, but stupid yes. There was a kid in my class who was an unruly bully. We did not get along very well, but he would go through stints where he would act like my friend. One of these friendly times, he pulled me aside and showed me a huge knife that he had in his backpack. He was expelled by the end of the day. Somebody must have turned him in. A guy I went to high school with got super drunk and attempted to drive home with a much younger, but still legal, girl he'd met at a bar. He rolled the car off of a highway on ramp, flipping it several times and killing the girl. He survived, but wasn't at the scene when the cops arrived. He was found 2 hours later, several miles away, walking along the shoulder of the highway. He was covered in blood and had removed his shirt and shoes at some point when they breathalyzed him. He was still well over the legal limit. This was about 3 years ago. He was charged with murder, but the case hadn't gone to trial yet. Two guys I went to high school with robbed and murdered an older gay man in the desert and then used the defense that he was coming onto them. They were both acquitted of the charges and released. What really pissed me off is that my friend who told me the story thought the guy's defense was justified and that the old guy got what was coming to him. This was many years ago, and I know things have improved. But as a gay man, and my friend knew I was gay when she told me the story, this broke my heart. Like gay men everywhere, I had to acknowledge that many straight people just hate us and want us dead. Things are much better across the US, but this kind of thing used to be a pretty common occurrence. I went to the toilet once just to notice that some dude had taken a shit right in front of the toilet door because it was locked. This dude is henceforth known as the floor shitter. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.